Welcome everybody joining. All right, I see a couple more people have joined. I'm going to go ahead and get us started just because I know we have a lot of exciting content to move through today. So welcome everyone to this webinar on measuring and communicating impact. We're so excited to share this with you all today. We have a really exciting conversation coming up between some partners and alumni on how they effectively communicate the impact that they're seeing in their communities of their work on NNIP work. NNIP projects. My name is Emily Verberg. I'm a training and technical assistance specialist here at the Urban Institute. And my colleagues will introduce themselves as they come on mic in the coming hour. Just want to make a note that we are recording this session, so keep that in mind. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the goal for today's session is that participants will be learning from each other's experiences and advice, and also be exchanging ideas to better communicate your impact. So we know that communicating impact is something that we all think about in different ways, and we hope that y'all will use the chat to communicate your own experience and expertise in this area as we move through this discussion. Just a quick overview of our agenda before I pass it to Kathy. We are going to spend a couple of minutes talking about NNIP and what impact looks like in our organization. We'll do a short pair and share activity. We'll break out into breakout groups. And then Kathy will give an overview of the NNIP Impact Award announcement that just went out this week. Then we'll hear from our NNIP Impact Fellows. These are partners who are going to share their stories about how they communicate impact with us today. And finally, we'll wrap up with some sharing of resources and thinking about what's coming up next in the NNIP network. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Kathy.
Great. So we just wanted to start with the foundation of why we're all here. It's great to see people jumping into this conversation. This is some of our new language that both describes the work of the partners and the networks about helping communities use data to shape strategies and investments so all neighborhoods are places where people can thrive. So we will be sending around a communication packet later on, but we're trying to use this as a touch point as Lee and I are going through planning our activities and communicating the value of NNIP to outside folks too. Next. As researchers, we felt like we should define terms before we jump in and use them. This is a definition that is adapted from one from Urban Institute's Office of Impact. And I know, as Emily mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to define this, but I think this definition, sorry, there was a little bit of an echo. Like our mission statement, it focuses on the why, about helping, having people experience positive change in their lives. It acknowledges that there's quantifiable things, but also there's a lot of qualitative changes that we know that our work contributes to. Like people feel more empowered to use data to bring into city council, or they feel like, or nonprofits can understand data and be more comfortable with data, also harder to track. And then the last piece that we like about, and Urban's has a parallel statement too, is that we know NNIP partners aren't making the change all by themselves. We're working with a group, our collaborators locally, to make things happen, that good things in the places where we live. Jake, do you want to jump in? We're going to start with interactive piece today to have you get to know each other and just break the ice.
Yeah, and if we can go to the slide with the prompt for the pair and share. What we're going to do is just break out into groups of three. Oh, I should introduce myself. I'm Jake Cowan. I'm an alumni of NNIP here in Chicago, and I will also be talking after this pair and share about the Impact Fellowship that I helped run. So the parent share here, this is really a prompt to get you thinking about your local work and the things that excite you about your local work and how they help your community. This is also, we'll reference the things you talk about and ask you to think about them as we dig into the rest of the webinar content later on. So don't get too hung up on whether it's what it's about. Just think about what is it that excites you about your work and how it's helping your community, and have some conversation about that. So we're going to take just about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and get into the rest of our content here. And Emily will be in the main room, I think, if you have any technical questions or Zoom needs or anything else. So Emily, I think we're ready to go to our groups.
Great. I'm opening the groups now. Hi, Kira and Gustavo. Are you able to see your breakout room?
Hi, Emily. It's Gustavo. I'm sorry, but I'm in the in between places and I can't join a group right now.
Oh, okay. No worries.
Apologies.
No worries. You can just hang out here. Everybody should be back in about 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Kira, let me know if you'd like to join a breakout room. I'm happy to help you get there. Otherwise, you're fine to hang out here too. Welcome, Layla. We've got folks in breakout rooms right now, but they'll be coming back in about 2 minutes and we'll get back to the webinar.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I was in and then I had a call from our IT people and I needed to answer it. So.
Oh, no worries at all. Sorry you got kicked out.
No worries.
I just came back on my own. I think the rest of them will be in soon.
Welcome back, everyone. I just realized I was muted before, but Jake, would you like to say anything else on the pair share before we pass it on to Kathy?
You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. No, we can jump right back into Kathy's presentation.
Great, thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We were just commenting on how fast the time goes when you're chatting about the work and have a lot of questions. And we're waiting for, obviously, it's glad to see the conversations, people coming back. Before we jumped into sharing the having the partners share their perspective on their individual impact, we wanted to let you know that we are in the midst of developing metrics to try to track how we are doing on our network strategic goals. I would say both the measures and the storyline on these, and we wanted to remind folks what those were. One was to influence other local places to adopt data-informed policies and practice to distribute resources more fairly across neighborhoods. The second one is trying to engage national networks and organizations about how they use data and to really increase the investment in local data capacity and following our principles of equitable use of data. And then the third one that is most visible to you is our work to strengthen and expand the NNIP network to help you all improve your impact. The cross-cutting strategies, how we're going about this, are below that I won't walk through. But I'll point out in the second one, we've been thinking about how to strengthen the exchange between NNIP and Urban to leverage Urban's assets for NNIP and vice versa. And we had the mobility webinar that many of you attended from our colleagues in the Research to Action Lab. And NNIP Urban is going through a strategic planning process now, which is also focused on impact. And we're working through our theories of change and on our various work at Urban, which also has an even more indirect impact than you. It's both data and research, and then it's at a national level without often the relationships that you guys have. So it's been front of mind, but it's helpful for us to be able, Leah and I have been working on articulating to the Urban folks how NNIP can feed into Urban's impact and thinking about how Urban's strength and leverage and communications platforms can help all of you achieve what you want to achieve too. So thinking about those intersections has been on our mind, and we'll be sharing more about that as things get organized to share. I think that's the next slide. Emily sent a note on Monday to any of you who are receiving the business emails announcing this year's calls for the G. Thomas Kingsley Impact Award. Tom loved hearing from all of you about the difference your work is making. And this was the joy of his whole life. This was Leah's idea for the award that we launched at a 20th anniversary in Cleveland to celebrate, to both surface those stories and celebrate the difference you guys are making and help share that with other folks. And we think about Tom. Well, I think about Tom at least every week, sometimes every day, depending on what we're doing. So he would be excited to see the next generation of folks doing all this good work with data. And then the next slide. Just to encourage you, I know you have 100,000 things on your plate and you don't have time. You think you don't have time to apply, but you really should make time. We tried to make the application pretty streamlined. We think it'll benefit you for all the reasons Jake will tell you in a little while about storytelling and how that benefits you. We will have a session at the NNIP Partners meeting to present the award. We write about the stories, about the winning story, and about many of the people who just applied. We write stories on the website and publicize that through our newsletter and LinkedIn and all those other channels to increase your fame. And then a small monetary acknowledgement with an honorarium or paying for your hotel at the next meeting. So Jake will tell you later, but this is also can be more interactive. Leah, Jake, and I are available to chat through any ideas that you have or questions you have about the award. Now, I'll turn it over to Jake.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the inaugural NNIP Impact Storytelling Fellowship, and then you'll hear directly from our storytelling fellows that are listed up here. So if we can go to my first slide, Emily. Oh, there we go. All right, so this was the inaugural Impact Storytelling Fellowship. We kicked it off in October 23, and we are in the process of wrapping it up right now. It's the first time we tried this, and we got a decent, I think there was a dozen or so folks from the network that applied. We had a really brief expression of interest form, and 3 Impact Fellows were selected, and these are the explorers you will hear from shortly. We started this program with a pretty simple high-level goal for each of the Impact Fellows to tell an impact story. Each of the Impact Fellows brought an idea of a project or an initiative that they wanted to tell an impact story about. And these were just like the kinds of ideas you all were talking about in the breakout rooms earlier. And that's really where impact storytelling can start, is telling a story about something that inspires you about your work and that you're excited to talk about. This was a bit of an experiment also with providing technical assistance within the NNIP network that supports the new strategic plan. And we are also planting a flag that says impact storytelling is important, and that having examples of impact storytelling can help you, the NNIP partners, do more storytelling as well. So you'll hear from Amanda, Cristina, and Nikolai about the stories they developed. To tell you about how the fellowship worked, the fellows each conducted interviews and background research to get details and specifics for developing their stories. I provided some technical assistance and support from my place at Mission Control here in Chicago, and we had a couple of collaborative meetings. We can go to the next slide, Emily. So Kathy already talked a little bit about a more specific definition of impact as they think about it at Urban and at NNIP HQ. I want to share with you some of the ideas about impact that we discussed during the Impact Storytelling Fellowship. First of all, the idea of impact is sometimes it's huge, it's obvious, and it's exactly what we expect. And we know the impact because we can see it. There's research or science to support the idea that that impact will happen. It might be embedded in the goals of a project or the project's design, or in a logic model or in a theory of change. But impact can also be quite unexpected. It can be nuanced. It might not be defined up front. There isn't always a convenient, tidy logic model or theory of change behind everything we're doing. And sometimes it's only after we do the work and after we have the major events of a project that we know or can see what the outcomes are. And so what each of the Impact Fellows did was identify the outcomes for the project or initiatives they wanted to tell stories about by starting with the question, what changed for people and places? So this idea of focusing on people and places is about pushing beyond the data and pushing beyond the capacities to use data that our work creates. Those are obviously both important things, important components of our work. But the storytelling work here moved towards finding out, did the data lead to a change for people and communities? And the way this fellowship considered whether the things expected or that were not expected happened is conducting interviews with people involved with the work. Impact measurement can be as simple as this: documenting what happened. And if we go one more slide, Emily, I talked just a little bit now about the brief look at how we talked about impact, and now I want to talk about the storytelling component. The starting point for storytelling is deciding who the audiences are for your story and how you will use the story. May we all be so fortunate for our stories to be told in a cozy Irish bar, but in reality, we need to tell our stories about impact with our key stakeholders, our funders, our boards, all the people and groups that make our work successful. And these are groups that typically don't hang out in Irish bars on a weeknight. Stories need to be shaped around the details that will be specific and clear for the people you're talking to. And for each of the Impact Fellows, this meant that the interviews were conducted with people working in communities who had used data or whose organizations were invested in because of decisions that were informed by data, so that these interviews could surface and document details that would resonate with the audiences they were going to talk to. And most of those details are about people and communities. And so with that, and Emily, you can turn off the slides now. I'm going to turn it over to our Impact Fellows to share their stories they developed. You'll hear different stories from Amanda in Baltimore, followed by Cristina in San Antonio, and then Nikolai in Atlanta. I encourage you to listen for the different ways each of the stories approach impact. And then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A after each story, and drop questions in the chat at any time. So I think we're turning it over to Amanda now to kick us off for this part.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Phillips-De Lucas. I am the director here at the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. I just turned on my stopwatch, so I'm going to keep it to those 5 minutes. So as a new director who stepped into this role just over a year ago, it was important for me in participating in this fellowship to really understand the impact of our core mission activities. And those activities are really 2 big things. One is our vital signs report that we put out annually, and the other is Baltimore Data Day. So for this fellowship, I was really kind of focused on understanding the impact of Baltimore Data Day writ large. And diving into this particular event was really important to me, both as an opportunity to really understand why people continued to go to the event, what people's outcomes were, why they come back year to year, but it was also a necessity. Following the pandemic, we've seen a decline in sponsorships, but an increase in popularity, and that is not the way you want that chart crossing each other. So I was hoping to kind of gather some stories, gather some information that we could share with sponsors that might make them really might make them want to sponsor us again or become a new one. So there was a practicality in this as well. So what we did for my particular impact story was reach out to the frequent flyers of Baltimore Data Week, which ultimately resulted in kind of 2 long-form interviews that I conducted. And both these interviews were really helpful to me because they elicited very different things. And I would sort of say that there are 2 kind of big impacts that I learned about Data Day. The first is that for many people who attend, they come as a community member. They might work with data or work in science and technology in like their day-to-day life. They kind of came as a community member, and sort of taking away some of that professional baggage was allowed them to sort of meet and talk with people that they would have never connected with otherwise. So someone I spoke with works for the state DOT, but through day-to-day, he was able to build out a partnership in his neighborhood that worked with MICA, which is the Maryland Institute of College, Maryland. So the arts place down the street. And to do social design and sort of improve the bike lanes in his community, and built out a whole partnership just from meeting people at day to day. And for him, that was really important because as a state DOT, they don't really connect with city DOT that often. So it was just an opportunity to like implement a project that was really important and personal to him, but wouldn't have been possible through his professional life. So that was, I think, one of the main things we learned through doing the stories. And the second one was that day-to-day for many offers an opportunity for ideas to flourish and develop over time. So we spoke with the leader of two organizations, Fight Blight, Be More, and SOS Fund. Fight Blight sort of started coming to Baltimore Data Week because they were using our data through vital signs. This was someone who was trying to track vacancies in their community and really sort of understand what was going on day to day in our community. And then following the pandemic, what began to happen was this sort of growing sense that housing was connected to public health. So her work very quickly shifted into untangling titles, tax sale advocacy, so stopping the tax sale in Baltimore, and renewing ground rent. And that's sort of how the SOS Fund came to be. And the founder of these organizations really said, look, without Baltimore Data Day, we wouldn't have been able to get so many people organized around this idea. That sort of explaining to people what tangled title is, it's complicated. They don't really understand it, but we just kept mentioning it year after year after year. And by the time that you move virtually for the pandemic, we had a lot of people who were just like, oh, we understand the problem. We know how to address it. What do you need? And that what do you need question eventually got them a partnership with some lawyers who have been doing the work of untangling those titles. So that sort of connective impact was also a very big one that came out of the story. I have 15 seconds left, so I'm going to be really brief with this last one. But a theme that came out in one of our conversations was that the data and indicators that we have often means that it was important for the communities to, they use the word, the data fought against being pathologized, that data was a mechanism to sort of show value in communities and neighborhoods that often gets overlooked, either through vacancy or through other sort of social ills or ills of the built environment. And that our data was really an opportunity for them to advocate and sort of fight against some of those narratives. That was less a data week outcome, but it was one that I think was very important and came across, and I was happy to learn. So that's me.
Cool. Thank you, Amanda. It was not a small piece of work to figure out how to connect the work you were doing day to day to the folks you talked to in the neighborhood. So I loved hearing that story. And Cristina, we're going to cue you up now.
Thank you. That was a great story, Amanda. And before I begin, I just want to acknowledge like what's going on in Baltimore, and my thoughts and are with you in the city and all the families affected. Sorry. Okay, so community information now. We've had a lot of discussions like between our team of like not really knowing where our data ends up or who uses it and for what. We kind of just like throw it out there and like whatever happens and like maybe we'll get some feedback or a story back. So I think that might have been one of the driving reasons as to why we pursued this fellowship. And after a discussion with Jake and Laura, we kind of decided to pursue our impact story with the United Way. We've been working with them and collaborating with them for a long time on like several different projects. But one of our main projects now with them, like what we collaborate on with them consistently, has been their impact councils, which they put together to address social disparities in San Antonio. So those impact councils include Ready Children, Successful Students, Strong Individuals and Families, and Safety Net councils, and they're all kind of address different things, but all with the goal of addressing disparities in San Antonio. So what we do is we annually update data sheets related to each of these impact councils, and the United Way, along with their partners and community stakeholders, kind of make decisions on, like, okay, are the programs that we are implementing and funding, are they working? Are they working towards our goal of decreasing disparities? Or do we need to shift? Like, is this indicator not changing? Do we need to fund new programs? So we do that annually, but in addition to that, they have something what they call strategy mapping. And if Laura wants to chime in, I don't know how often that happens, but it's like less often than annually. And it's kind of like a big picture, like, okay, are we doing the right things? Like, let's shift. And so we also provide that data, and then also provide data support for that to answer questions, explain indicators, kind of be like a neutral party to like say like, well, this is what this is saying, that's not what it's saying, things like that. So because of these data sheets that we have provided annually and also like less periodically for strategy mapping, the United Way has like directly made decisions based on this data. And so a few of the examples that came from conversations with the United Way were expanding a program called Dual Generation from the east side of San Antonio and expanding it to the west side of San Antonio. And that was based off of zip code data that we provided them, noticing that there was like a need for this program. And what this program does is it addresses individual, family, and student success by providing them family coaching, professional development, and educational training opportunities for both the adults in the household, and then also providing quality childcare and out-of-school programming for their children. So what's really cool about the United Way is they also have like individual impact stories that they write. So I was able to like read through those and kind of include like a story of like an individual that really felt that that program helped her. So another program that they actually created based on data that we gave them, what that was tracking 8th grade math scores, showed a really big dip for students of color in 2021. So that attracted a new funder to implement a program called Multiply Success that provides math support for students of color in San Antonio. And the last thing, and probably the thing I think is probably the most interesting, from my understanding, Community Information Now put together what we called a wage disparity indicator. So this basically just compares the wage disparities between sex and race. And consistently in San Antonio, it's always been that like the non-Hispanic white male makes almost 2 times as much median earnings as women of color. So because of that, the United Way, or because of that indicator and us tracking it year to year, United Way kind of decided to fund 2 strategies. Sorry, I'm not keeping track of my time, so if I'm talking too much, just stop me. But I'm almost done. So one was an awareness strategy, and the YWCA is what it leads that. And so they just kind of like make people aware that a wage disparity exists. They have a cohort of business partners that they have like quarterly meetings with, and like, I guess, have educational programming with them. And the second arm of that was funding a education and workforce development with one of the oldest nonprofit organizations in San Antonio called Family Service Association. And so women of color specifically go through these programs where at the end of them, they are ready to enter the workforce. And then they're continued to be supported if they want to pursue higher education. And then there's a whole bunch of other resources that that association provides them. So it's really cool being able to just like see where our data ends up, because it's not something that I personally thought about. And I wanted to put this impact story together to kind of work on, let my brain work on something different besides numbers. And it was really cool and fun to learn about all the things that are going on in San Antonio based on this data alone.
Thank you, Christina. I love all the detail you were able to get into about where the data led with all the partners. So hopefully we'll be able to dig into that a little more too in our Q&A time. Want to turn it over to you, Nikolai.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikolai. I'm Community Impact Officer at Neighborhood Nexus in Atlanta. I'm going to try to be brief here. Well, I think everybody should know at this point but we've been through a lot of changes in the last year and a half. And those changes that we've had in the organization and our work respond to sort of demands that the partners that we have in the city have. And what we tried to do with this story, with the impact story, was to frame it around a specific case in terms of where the learning comes from and what it leads to in terms of the type of work that we're going to do now. So there's two parts to this: the impact that it has on us, these things have on us as an organization, what we do, the type of data we collect, but also the impact that data and those new efforts will have in the communities we serve and our partners serve. To start, basically, these learnings come from our project from a couple of years ago. It was the Metro Atlanta Racial Equity Atlas, Maria. Basically, this was developed in partnership or together with the Partnership for Southern Equity. And it was intended as a tool for communities to better understand and communicate issues related to inequities and how that affects their quality of life. However, like many data tools that we develop, the limited data available about the community's experiences diminish the platform's capacity to accurately showcase the complexity of the problem and the burdens that comes with inequity. So through the community engagement efforts from Maria, Partnership for Southern Equity also validated the need to collect and understand asset data and lived experience as key informant pieces of the experiences of people in Atlanta. So that's how we come to what we're calling, and it's in the pilot process right now, Atlanta POV, which is a pilot survey to collect and share that missing data that will help us better frame local issues. And it's in partnership with Atlanta Civic Circle, which is a local nonprofit civic journalism platform. And with that, we will capture community voice of Metro Atlanta residents to better understand their priorities, opinions, and values. And that's where POV, play with words, come in. Basically, this community voice data, again, will be collected by brief pulse surveys every month or so. And they respond to that part of the information that is missing from traditional federal and state publicly available sources. From the interviews that I carried out with some of our partners, one of the phrases that came out is that these will add definitely more color and texture to the data that we already work with to better understand the nature of the issues we're trying to address. One of these organizations was GEARS. GEARS works to support high quality early learning and healthy development for children birth to 5. And they immediately said that, or have established that POV can help them understand what quality early education means for residents. Because so far their data tools have been focused on measuring quality on what's available, which is supply and demand. But that doesn't speak to the reality of what families need. Similar, WeNet Coalition that works in supporting efforts, especially in this case, they're interested in supporting efforts related to childhood trauma. And they work in Atlanta's I think it's the most diverse county in the state. They are very interested in understanding what are the specific stigmas and biases associated with childhood trauma and how they differ across communities, so they can better direct their communication efforts to serve their communities better. And examples like that we also got from other partners, like again PSC, which we work with Maria, and Atlanta Well Building Initiative, which are interested in disaggregating the data that they use to understand the racial equity gap. We just recently launched a Pathways to Prosperity report about that, and they want to go deeper in new layers of analysis. At this point, we're in the sort of rolling out the initiative and collecting or recruiting participants. We're aiming to have 10,000 people across Metro Atlanta by the end of 2025. And with this, we're trying to help them answer the questions that always come after we deliver or we finish a data tool. Because I think we're all familiar with the fact that even though we make a dashboard, there's always follow-up questions that usually are answered by assumptions or conversations. So we want to make sure that our partners have the capacity to actually get to those answers. And it has been very interesting to have these conversations with our partners to see how this can actually change and improve their programming.
All right, thanks, Nikolai. I love that you got into the level of detail here where, and I think you said this earlier, but to make it really clear, we actually started, right, trying to tell the story of impact of Maria, and we ended up taking what we learned from that and helping you tell the story of the impact you expect from the POV work, and you set yourself up for how you're going to be able to tell that story going forward. We've got time for the rest of the webinar for questions from folks, so I will pause to see what folks want to ask, and if there are no questions, I will ask a few. And feel free to come off mute if you want to ask a question live.
I have a question for Amanda, not to be this negative or discouraging, I guess, but I also wonder, like, if the day-to-day, and lots of partners do day-to-day, so I think that this is important for the NNIP model too, because I tell people about day-to-days all the time and what a difference they make. I don't know if there's other folks, well, maybe Kate can chime in from Hartford, but because if it's the connectivity that they mention and meeting other participants, then it feels like there's less does it matter what the content is? Like, but you need good content to bring them there, you know, like your programming. Or does it mean that you need to like mix more networking with the programming of your trainings and panels and other things like that?
Sure. And I think that's a good question. So last year when we did day-to-day, it wasn't the first year fully back, but it was sort of the fullest it has been since the pandemic. And what we did, which took an extraordinary amount of staff time, was we held like info sessions with people in our like from our newsletter, and like we held Zoom meetings, and we're like, what do you want to see every data week? And we got a whole bunch of topics, and then we just kind of divided and conquered and put the panels together. And then there were some panels we met with like 3 times to sort of hone in on what they were talking about, what sort of the overall themes were. Some came together, some were just research teams that were happy to share, but there were others that were more kind of amorphous ideas that we really worked with the panelists to shape and sort of structure one-to-one. And I was recently in a more administrative conversation where I was trying to put a dollar amount to what data week cost. And I gave them a number, and I was told that's too high. And I was like, no, it's not too high. That a lot of it's not the cost of the event, like the in-person. What it actually is, all of that work that takes us about a month and a half of time to really do that kind of coordination work so that people can network at the event, right? Like we do a lot of that setup work behind the scenes so that during the day, people can just kind of set it and forget it in a particular way. So I think it's acknowledging like that behind the scenes labor, that in order to get to that level of connection and for kind of the data to be secondary, it takes a lot of it took a lot of work to get there. And I would also sort of
can't just invite everybody in a room with no purpose.
And one thing we did last year that was very, very successful was we did a lightning round during lunch where we just offered like people, we timed them, they had 2 minutes, introduce themselves, tell us what you do, and then we kicked them off the stage. And that was wildly successful. People were like so happy to like learn and do these sort of on the spot introductions and make connections from there. And our biggest failure is we didn't have a good enough tracking system of who was actually up there. So I think it's being very intentional about the format of things in order to get those connectivity outcomes. I hope
And
that answers
Kathy,
your question.
And Kathy, also because you made this nice connection to the fact that there's lots of other folks that do day-to-days. I want to share that part of what we'll be doing as we wrap up the fellowship too is in addition to sharing the stories that Amanda, Nikolai, and Cristina wrote, where we've done things like put together interview questions that were used to help get to some of these outcomes that they've all talked about. We'll share some of those other resources too, because those are relatively adaptable too in terms of questions too. So I do think there's something to be learned from all of these that folks can apply in your sort of day-to-day work. Cristina, I wonder if I could put you on the spot. I think we heard a little bit from Amanda and Nikolai about where some of the stories will get used or sort of how it's informing some day-to-day work. Have you all thought much about where you will share the story or how this is going to help CI now?
To put it briefly, I personally have not thought about this. I don't know if Laura
Not
has,
yet.
and we definitely haven't discussed it. But
That's my putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. Now I know that I need to think about that because I thought NNIP was going to handle that.
I mean, we're definitely going to put these things out, but it's on the NNIP website, and like these stories will be available. But it's just thinking through a little bit about and you if I can share back what you shared with me, I think I enjoy that you're hearing about I think you described it as getting out of your data bubble and being able to share these stories, which I think is just intentionally valuable to carry forward in your day-to-day work.
For sure. And if Laura has any thoughts and might have thought about it already, I'm happy to have her chime in.
No, just the usual suspect routes, like sharing through our newsletter and on our website. But I think we'd like to pull together a collection of stories from like this one and then across our Bear Data Dive learning so that we can actually put together like a compendium of not long, but yeah, a little collection of different stories about how different people have used our data in different ways.
Well, it seems like we've got just about 5 minutes left, and I imagine, Emily, you're wanting to get the wrap-up slide going. So if there are more questions in the chat, throw them out there, and I think all of us are available to continue the conversation afterwards too. I'm going to throw also a link for my calendar if anybody wants you to schedule a time with me to talk about impact. I'm happy to chat with you.
And I'd love, Nikolai, I think the pulse survey would be of great interest to many people. So maybe even, I don't know, whenever you're ready to put a few sentences together about the plans to share. I know not all the partners are here today.
Yeah, Dallas is doing a similar, they're doing a big metropolitan-wide survey, but they're doing some little pulse surveys throughout the summer too, I think.
Nice, absolutely. We'll reach out with any updates soon, hopefully.
Yeah, there's such a craving for timely information and like you said, the like whys and hows and all the qualitative pieces.
Absolutely. And thanks, Jake, for all the support in this effort, though. It was great.
Oh, no, and thank you all. Y'all did great work, and I'm just super excited how your stories turned out. So thank you and congratulations to y'all.
I don't think that we actually figured out who was going to walk through this. Anyway, Emily, do you want? I can walk through it.
Yeah,
or do you want to go ahead?
Nope, I think
Okay.
it's great if you do. I can put the links in the chat.
We have wanted to let you know, but not warn you about things that are coming up. Cole and our friend Rob Patinkalo, a aficionado here is doing an intro to GitHub webinar on April 11th. So we'll be sending reminders about that. There's been a really good take up of that. The Impact Award, as we mentioned, are due Monday, April 22nd. And we'll send a reminder out again next week with all the signups for the intro for the office hours. I just sent an office hours note today too to the Google group. We will be sending a save the date, very exciting, for the NNIP meeting in Detroit, September 23rd through the 25th. We've been putting this events calendar together, both to try to spread out all of our data collection asks of you and to really look forward on some events, but nothing is carved in stone. So if you have other ideas, let us know. As I mentioned, the communications package with new language and slides to describe NNIP is also in the works. So there's, and then Leah would ask me if any of you are working on your finance survey. I did just learn that some of the links might not be right on the latest reminders you got, but so we're working on correcting that and sending out a correction. Thanks to Amanda for flagging that. But if you could fill that out, the
original email should be right though.
The original email is right. It's possibly less sexy / fun than impact stories, or either the data part or the impact part start, but having as Amanda mentioned, funding all of this amazing work is really important in trying to figure out the business models around it. So we think that the data will be really useful to have all of you sort of benchmark, get ideas, and start the conversation about financial sustainability too, which is essential, if sometimes less fun. So all of that is going on. If you have other ideas of informal discussions or other ideas and to get together and connect with, definitely let us know along the way. So we're probably trying to do a mix of both planning ahead, but also being flexible to let opportunities come up. So thanks everybody and thanks really to the presenters. I have a lot of follow-up notes and to the people who shared during the initial peer sharing also. I think we learned a lot today. Have a great week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.